I think we will get started. Thanks everybody for being here. I see 171 participants so far, so that's really exciting. We're really excited about the grant opportunities that we have announced and will be sort of working hard on all of 2024 and likely into 2025. I'm Sarah Sherpicki. I'm the director of the Office of 60 by 30, formerly at Leo, and now a proud unit of the Michigan Department of Lifelong Education, Advancement, and Potential. Know many of you, particularly in the community college space, but this is also an exciting opportunity for us to build partnerships with our four-year partners and to support their work as well. So what I am going to be, the sort of plan for today is I'm going to be talking a lot. And that's because this is the like, let's get the information out. And so we will hopefully have a little bit of time for Q&A, but I would say at this point, our goal is really to like collect all of the questions, which we can then respond to through additional webinars, written documents that we will put on the website that we've prepared for this. So this is going to be a little bit more, a little less interactive than is often fun, but a good opportunity for us to like start hearing what are the questions that are coming up for people as they review these grant opportunities. So with that, I'm going to kick it off. Kamara, it doesn't say her name, but Kamara Lewis from our office is sort of also here and will be hopefully kind of manning the chat. I hope that she is able to see it. Let me know if you can't, Kamara. So if we do get questions we can sort of answer right now, we will try to do that. But like I said, it's probably more going to be that we will collect. But do feel free to put questions in the chat as we're going so that we can make sure we're hearing what's coming up for people. So doesn't seem like there we go. So I'm using primarily, though there's a little bit of additional and new information on here, the guide that we released about a week and a half or 2 weeks ago that is sort of an overview of all of these grants. And I will just say that we really got the feedback over the last few months as we were doing work to talk with stakeholders about these grants. We really heard loud and clear, like, this is a lot, and can you try to communicate about it all at one time so that we can make sense of all of these different threads. And so what you're seeing here is 5 different grant processes funded by multiple different appropriations. But what we are trying to do is communicate it in a way that it is the clearest to the users. So you don't have to track like fund source so much as what opportunities am I eligible for, which makes sense for my campus. So if you have not spent some time with this guide, it is on the website. I would really encourage you to spend some time because there's a lot of information in it. I will be using it to speak from today, but I think we tried to design it so there's enough detail that it explains sort of without the benefit of voiceover, because our goal is that even though not every application is ready to release yet, that you, your institutions, or if you're a nonprofit partner or community member, that you can be sort of thinking right now about what do I want to do in March? What do I want to do in May? What do I want to do in October? And start to do that planning in a way that makes sense for you. So what's here? A description of the grants, a timeline of when they will be released, when those applications will be due, when they'll be awarded, an explanation. I think this is some of the thorniest stuff. We expect a lot of questions on how the different grants interact and am I eligible to apply for both this one and that one. Just to say off the bat, like you can apply for multiple of these grants. So again, that's part of what makes it a little confusing, but we are really excited about getting this funding out to support our institutions and our students. And then there's a little bit of guidance here also on like what are the eligible expenses and the evaluation criteria. There will be additional detail about all of those things in the actual application that becomes available for each opportunity. So the grants that we're talking about, and I will get into the detail here, are these 5 sort of first grants that you see on this list. That second category that we say other 60 by 30 programs that include funding, we just wanted to, really make it clear. Those are not necessarily competitive. They are additional funding sources or funding that our office helps administer. But these competitive grant processes are the Quick Start grants, the College Success grants, which have additional subcategories, the barrier removal grants direct to students, the barrier removal grants growing institutional capacity, and the Reconnect community action grants. So these five, these are all new. This is all one-time funding. And so none of these are things that we have done before. This is an entirely new process. And again, the overarching goal is that we are helping more students in Michigan enroll and complete a post-secondary education. And we know that our institutions need support in order to be able to do that. So to talk a little bit about what these 5 different categories are. The Quick Start grants are exactly that. This is one of the ones that's available now. You could think of this like doing self-assessment, planning, strategic planning, going through a process to elevate student voice on your campus and to better understand sort of what are the right next steps for your institution in order to apply later for one of the other grants. That's also not required. I mean, you can engage in planning for a whole range of purposes sort of with this grant. So those grants are, going to be smaller. They're also going to be faster. And again, we were realizing that for some institutions, they're going to be really ready to apply for some of the larger grants. And others need support going through a planning process. And that's really what Quick Start is designed for. The second category are our College Success grants. We'll get into the details, but there's actually 3 categories of these. They go up to $1 million. And these are really about creating institutional systemic practices that increase student success rates at our colleges, our 2 years and our 4 years. So we'll talk in more detail later about those. The barrier removal direct to students. This is really, you could think of like emergency grants. So the barrier removal direct to students, the pot is really designed so that the funding is going straight to students with additional need. No, not straight to, it is going to your institution to then allocate or distribute to students in a way that makes sense for your institution. The barrier removal, growing institutional capacity, those are grants that, similar to the College Success grants, are really around changing institutional policy and practice and sort of cementing a stronger approach to helping students who have unmet basic needs on your campus. And then, so of those first 4, all 4 of those are available to 4-year colleges and universities, 2 years, including our tribal colleges. This last category here, the Reconnect community action grants, these are only available to community colleges, and those community colleges have to be in partnership with a county government. So this is really about building support outside of higher ed in our communities for higher ed pathways, for post-secondary pathways. Again, we'll do detail on all of this. The amounts that you see at the bottom here are projections. They are not like firm funding pots. So this is great because it gives us some flexibility to respond and award within these categories based on the applications that we're receiving. So the Reconnect Community Action Grants, that's separate. That is a discrete $10 million pot that we need to use in sort of specific ways prescribed in boilerplate. But the rest are ways that we have are organizing one large pot of funding. And so we have the ability to sort of see what your institutions are requesting and to grow and shrink those. So this is sort of a guess about it's a guesstimate in terms of what we think we will be awarding this year in each of those categories. So Quick Start is more of a subset of College Success. or of the barrier removal grants, as opposed to sort of its own funding category. So really central to our design here, and again, this is a like, does it make it more confusing? Potentially, but we think ultimately was the right decision. What you will see for every one of these grants is that the application is going to be released, either it's already out or it's coming out within the next month. It will be the same application you will use, but there will be multiple application deadlines throughout the year. So if you are ready to apply at the first deadline, great, go for it. And if you aren't going to be ready until November, use that instead. We are not anticipating that there will really be like a financial cap in 2024. So we don't believe that there is like an advantage to applying early. I would say the advantage, it comes from submitting an excellent application that shows you know exactly what you're doing, what you intend to do with the funding, and have like a robust logic model and plan for delivering that. And so like submit when you're ready. So we're trying to meet institutions where they are. And again, if ready means you're ready to get applications in the first deadline, great. And if not, then wait. So now I'm going to get into the specific grants. And again, I will go sort of quickly through these, or else we'll really run out of time. But so the Quick Start grants I mentioned, these are mostly about planning, elevating student voice, or engaging in self-assessment. They are $50,000 to $75,000, and they are 6 to 8 months long. And so the goal is really that you are going to sort of get this grant, get right to work doing, undertaking a planning self-assessment process that will wrap up during the same calendar year and prepare you, if you want, to then apply for a larger grant. We're sharing the evaluation criteria here for the Quick Start grants. We really want to see an understanding that you're sort of grounding your work in student experience and in building institution-wide awareness around how important that is, and finding additional ways to bring that student experience into what you're planning. If you are using a self-assessment tool that you are sort of purchasing from somewhere else, you know, that it is a reputable tool with evidence behind it. And then, you know, a plan for kind of for disseminating and using the information that you gather through this process. So we want to, so that's what we're going to be looking for in the Quick Start grants. I will say, although maybe I'll say this later too, the Quick Start grant application, which is available now, I think it's 6 questions long. So we are, you know, looking for you to sort of concisely explain to us what you're going to do and why, and you know, are going to try to turn those grants around also really quickly. The college success grants, we start to get a little more complicated here. So there are 3 different levels of college success grant. The Amplify is at $100,000 to $200,000, Accelerate, which is $200,000 to $650,000, or Go Big, which is $600,000 to $1 million. You can also see that these grants have a longer time frame. So Amplify is just 1 to 2 years, but the Go Big grants could be spent over 3 years. Those amounts are not per year amounts. That would be the total grant award. You know, your application should reflect how long you want to spend that money, and we'll base our grant agreements around that. So this really is about, the college success grants are really around implementing evidence-based practices to some extent, like at scale across your institution to grow student persistence and completion. You can see the application windows here. And we'll get into a little bit about this is an area where we are anticipating some questions. And I think I'll say this for the first time, and I will probably multiple times say this today, which is like, engage with us. Don't think you have to go off and kind of plan and try to figure out, is mine an Amplify grant or an Accelerate grant? You know, we're building engagement opportunities for you to be able to get our guidance on that before you're at the point of submitting. So this is the first time I'll make that point. So the Amplify grant is really about opportunities where like you've already been doing something and you want to take it to the next level or continue it. So you've started something at one scale, you're ready to take it to the next. Accelerate and go big are really, we're moving more into this area of trying to change institutional practice around something. And again, that something is really going to be dependent on, what are the right needs and opportunities for your institution. So we provide a couple of examples of like what makes a difference. Now, obviously, a clear guidance is if you need $800,000, you're applying for a Go Big grant. But you should also be sort of prepared to think through what is a little bit different. What are we going to be looking for successful Go Big grants? We're probably going to see maybe some external partners. We're going to see it at a larger scale across your campus. And a strong connection across all of these to your strategic plan. This is a list you can revisit later for practices that we think are likely, because this is based on evidence around like what is working to increase student success across the country. So these are areas that we expect to see in these grants. It doesn't mean that if this isn't what you're doing, it's a definite no, but you should talk to us before you do the really intensive work of preparing for one of these applications, which are more complicated than the quick start applications. And so if you want to undertake a change in practice, or if you're doing multiple of these, or if you're just not quite sure where it fits, like we're going to be setting up a lot of different office hours. You can also just email us and ask for a one-on-one meeting. Like just again, talk to us if what you want to do is not on this list. We do want to see that what you want to do, though, is founded in evidence, both about like what is right for your campus, how do you know that, and about how a practice has been effective in other places. Moving on to the third category, barrier removal direct to students. This is also an application that is now open. And as I said at the top, these grants are really about getting funds to students who have additional need and who are at risk of stopping out without some additional support. Now, what's a little weird about this one, and we want to just make sure that this is really clear, is the amount you can apply for here is formula based. And so, and in fact, we have already done that formula and sort of produced a list of every college in the state, every public college, and said, here's your max award for this. The formula is based on the number and percentage of Pell eligible students. It's really a calculation based on that multiplies your Pell eligible students by a rate that is based on whether you serve a disproportionate number of Pell eligible students. But this is the part we want to be really clear about, that we don't want that to be interpreted as like, so that's how I'm supposed to spend it. I'm just supposed to give the money to Pell eligible students. We still want to see that you create your own plan for the right way to target students who will benefit the most and have the greatest need, that you have a plan for communicating to students and making sure that these funds are available, making sure they know that funding is available or additional supports are available. And so we still are expecting you to prepare a budget that shows how you're going to spend the money, and to answer, grant application questions. This isn't a guarantee that you get this, though the amount is formula based. The grant process is still sort of competitive. So that funding amount is available at the website. Again, that's later. And I would just also say for a couple of colleges, that amount would have been really small, and we understood that it would be not worth it to spend the staff time to apply. And so we created kind of a minimum threshold there. So 15,000, if your award based on our formula would have been under 15,000, we're just suggesting that you apply for 15,000. And for that sort of small amount, we also will be preparing a sort of simpler reporting process. We know there's a balance to achieve in sort of how large a grant is and how significant a reporting responsibility it creates for staff at the colleges. So we're hoping to strike that balance. So again, this is really about removing barriers by providing funds to students. We are expecting that in these funds, what we want to see in applications is that however you design your budget, however you're planning to deploy the funds, that at least 75% of your funding is going to go into students' hands or accounts, as it were. So I've already sort of touched on this, although I didn't call them evaluation criteria. But like I said, what we want to see is that you have a logical design for deploying funds to students in a way that will be most impactful for those students and serve students with greatest need. I used the term emergency grants earlier. They do not have to only be emergency grants. You don't have to wait for emergency in this case. So that's actually that is one possible use here. Again, I don't want to suggest though that that's the only possible use. We want to know that it's not only like one person in student services or in financial aid who knows about these grants, but that adults or faculty and staff across the college, sorry, adults are also students, that faculty and staff across the college sort of know about how students can take advantage of these resources so that whoever it is that the students are kind of confiding in, if that's what it comes to, knows how to react here. And then we will be asking, how you will track impact and know if this was effective and helpful in students persisting. Okay, getting back to one of the larger categories again, this is the other barrier removal category that is around growing institutional capacity. So I really think of this as like a sister to the college success grants, where this is about eliminating barriers, but by changing policy and practice at the school, as opposed to just like, we need more money. We do that. That's why we have the direct to students funding. This is different. This is about what are things that you want to do differently as an institution. What we will be looking for in the evaluation of those grants is, again, that sort of like logical plan. How are you going to build institutional capacity using evidence-based around the practices? We think that it's pretty clear that strong community partnerships or partnerships with other organizations are often an important part of successful barrier reduction work. So we are interested in seeing that. And again, a plan for engaging sort of across the silos of your institution on this solution. And then we want to see that this is about sort of changing the capacity of the institution over time. So what we don't want to fund with this is 2 more counselors for 2 years. That once the grant funding is over, would go away. And so we really are looking for how are you going to bake this into your work in the long term. And then finally, the grant the grant category that's a little bit different, the Reconnect Community Action Grants. So these are the applicants for these grants need to be a community or tribal college, but they must have partnership with a county government, and that can mean like the county government. It can also mean other sort of governmental bodies that have at least a county-wide purview. So like intermediate school district, for instance. And so again, the college is the applicant, but what we really want to see is that they are creating partnerships where people outside of the college are coming even more to the table of how to support students. And in this case, particularly, or with an emphasis on adult students, because this is connected to our Reconnect work, in coming to education and completing. So we do have a little bit more detail here. And so there are, let me go back to this, sorry. The Reconnect Entry Point Collaboratives, what we're trying to fund there is sort of the coming together of community partners around this. And so we know that can take sort of staff time to support, or consultants or research. It's like doing the work of bringing a collective together. I will say this also does not have to be a brand new collaborative. This can be something that already exists. So that you can think about that collaborative work as, or the collaborative sort of pot of funding as like the structure that is going to carry this partnership going forward. The college and career navigator support, again, this comes from a particular item in the budget, in the FY24 budget, and that is really to support the hiring of staff who will provide navigation support to adult students. They can support others as well. Adults have to be, like, how they're going to reach adult students have to be a part of this. And so the application, when we release it, it's like there's not going to be two applications. There'll be one application that allows you to apply for one or both of those pots. Again, whatever is right for the community. We really will be looking to see that partnership, that again, though the community college is the applicant, that the partnership from the community partners is robust and meaningful. We have, some suggestions about the type of partners we'd be looking to see. Again, it's not that it must have all of these, but this gives you an idea of what's right. And obviously that is going to vary from community to community. So again, a little more detail on those two different categories. The entry point collaboratives, a lot of this is about enrollment, but also completion and supporting that sort of structure of the work. And the navigators are really about funding the staff positions, or I keep saying staff. I don't mean to suggest that they must be full-time staff of somewhere. People, like, how are you going to fund navigators? And again, we really will be hoping to see a lot of partnership around this. We also want to see, importantly, that community has set a local college attainment goal or post-secondary attainment goal that is feasible and aligns with the 60 by 30 goal. So that doesn't mean 60, it means what's the right goal for our community based on our data that allows us to sort of push ourselves and keep aligning our work around increasing college attainment in our community. Okay, so that's the end of the kind of going individually through the grants. This is not an exhaustive list, but we did want to start sharing information about sort of what type of eligible expenses are appropriate for these grants. And so what you don't really see here is, like, we don't just want to fund a counselor, for instance. And so, but we are willing to fund staff, especially with stipend, if you're offering like stipends or honoraria for them to be taking on additional roles. And again, that's not a no, never would we fund someone's job, someone's position, but it really will need to be if that is some of the funding that you want, it has to be in the context of a long-term plan for sort of sustaining that, or for a position that is really temporary, that is like, this is a 2-year position to help us do X, Y, and Z. So you can see some of the eligible expenses, and those are going to be pretty similar for the Quick Start, the College Success, and the Barrier Removal Growing Institutional Capacity grants. The Barrier Removal Direct to Students grants are different. So what we want to see is that funding is really, like I said before, at least 75% of it is going to students. Again, you can do that in a lot of different ways: vouchers, putting it on their student account, providing transportation, like gas cards, or food support. You can do that in a lot of different ways, but that it is really going to students. But then we know that there are costs at the institution to administering that program as well. So you can use some of the funding to cover existing staff time, or to do printing and produce information and share information with students. The Reconnect Community Action grants are, a little bit different. And so that's where you're actually seeing more like people being funded. So that can be the navigators, staff to take care of the effort, to oversee and coordinate the efforts and the partners across all of these, pretty much. Well, not direct to students, but training and professional development as appropriate, vendors and consultants. and some IT and like tech support. So additional, as we're releasing the actual applications, you know, the applications really are like the definitive guide to each of these opportunities. And so you'll see greater specificity if it is different from what was in this guide in the actual applications themselves. So just a note that, like, you know, there are specific criteria across each of the grant categories. But there are a few things that, like, I suppose you could sort of say are the kind of values that underlie the design of this process. And so we want to see that the experiences of learners are being centered in your design for whatever applications that you're submitting, that you really are willing to think about, you know, what are things that we're doing as an institution that are, you know, creating barriers unnecessarily for our students. Approaching students from an asset-based perspective, as opposed to looking at them as deficit-ridden. Really being interested in understanding whether what you do with this funding works and being willing to talk about it. I think, you know, we all know that even if we adopt evidence-based practices, like there's still a chance that things are not going to go according to plan. And in fact, it's almost certain that they won't. And we want to be sort of contributing to the field of knowledge about why things worked or didn't. And so we want to be able to have kind of honest conversations and learn alongside you about, you know, what's not going according to plan or is different from what you expected. And then we do want you to really tap into sort of the field. You know, there's a lot of work out there. There are associations and groups that you can tap into to make sure that, you know, you're talking about kind of what people are doing that works in the field across the country. So a little bit about the application processes. So as I mentioned, the Quick Start grant and the barrier removal grants are now the direct to students grants. The applications became available yesterday. We are planning to release all 3 of the other applications this month. And so if you haven't signed up for the listserv that is like specific to our grant opportunities, I'd really encourage you to do so, because then you can see those applications as they become available. So this slide shows all of the deadlines. And again, we really labored over this a little bit. Like, is there a better way to do it? Because a matrix of deadlines is not usually anybody's first choice. But again, we felt like our sort of commitment to making a number of these opportunities available at multiple times so that it can work for the workflow of your institution was the right approach. We also want to be able to maintain a commitment to you that it's not going to take us 4 months to review your grants and get back and respond to them. So we've also had to sort of stagger things. So we want to be able to let you know, in about a month, we'll be firmer when those deadlines are, or when we're releasing the applications. But we want to be able to respond quickly. So the first time this guide went out, these just had months. You'll notice that they now have actual dates. They're all Fridays. So, pin this up somewhere. So then there's a little bit that I'm going to try. I think this is just like, you have to just do this by looking at the list yourself and thinking through it. So I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this, even though it's an area that we know there's like a possibility of us not having fully explained it. So many of these grants can really be sort of stacked. You can apply for so many of them within the same year. So this slide here is showing us there's the Quick Start grants. They're sort of their own thing. And you can get them while you're also getting a couple of other types of grants, but they have to precede the really big grants. And so those are the 2 larger categories under the College Success and the barrier removal growing institutional capacity. So those are the category 3. So in category 2, you can receive like any of these with other grants. So that's the College Success Amplify grant. So that's the smallest category of college success that is about like, we have a practice we're doing now and it needs an injection of funding because there's a lot of promise here. The barrier removal direct to students, we're hoping to move those sort of as quickly as possible so that we don't want to miss supporting a student who could benefit from them right away. The Reconnect community, it says connection, should say action. Those grants are you can receive at the same time as the others. And then if you received a 2023 student success grant, and obviously you would still be working through that, that's fine. That doesn't prohibit you from receiving any other grants. You may want to mention if it is related to any of the other grants that you then apply for in your application. There are some additional kind of limitations. We're not going to be awarding multiple Go Big, barrier removal, or accelerate grants. Barrier removal, growing institutional capacity. Yeah, this is better. This is just written better than I can say it. So just read what is written here and you will have the right information. But so what you can take away from this is like, ooh, I can get a lot of these. And so we do provide a couple of scenarios that like work. And again, we are not trying to suggest that every college should be trying to get 4 or 5 grants, but you might. It is possible. We also provide a few scenarios that don't work and try to explain sort of what didn't work about that scenario. So I think the sort of largest one to watch for is just like when if you get a quick start grant, there are some grants that you can't apply for then until that quick start grant activities are completed. Now, I will say the quick start grants say they're 6 to 8 months. And that's what we would write a grant agreement for. If you finish the activities in 3 months, you're then fine to apply for like the subsequent grants. We would just wrap up your quick start grant when the activities are complete. So there's not a requirement that you must take 8 months to do it. Okay, so when the actual applications come out, you will see more of the evaluation criteria, details on what that selection process is going to look like. I did not mention, for some grants, we are going to be doing interviews in addition to the application. And so that will be included, but so not everything is just going to be sort of a paper application. We might also do just short follow-up conversations to some of the applications. Absolutely, the Reconnect community action grants, we will be doing interviews because we want to sort of have that engagement with the partners in addition to the institution itself. More detail on eligible expenses, some additional guidance on like what if colleges want to work together, and then some additional information on how to get feedback on your proposals or ideas, or other opportunities to get find additional information and capacity as you're developing your application. I will also say, you can even hear in my language, we're really focused on supporting our institutions. Nonprofits are also eligible applicants for all of these grants except for the Reconnect Community Action. What we will be looking for with those nonprofits, because the point is, sustainable change at institutions to grow student success, is that nonprofits have to kind of have that partnership. So if it makes sense for a nonprofit to be the applicant for some reason, but that work must be done basically in close partnership with a college. And so the application itself is sort of will be set up to collect and untangle that. But I realize I have been really focusing all of my words on our institutions, and nonprofits are eligible applicants. Okay. A few other details. So this is new. If you've looked through the slideshow, this is where there's a couple new pieces of information for you. So the applications themselves are all going to need to be submitted sort of through our grants portal. So if you go to the 2 pages today where we have applications available for the Quick Start grants and the barrier removal direct to students grants, what you will find there is a Word document. You can use that Word document to plan, but you cannot give us the Word document. So at least 2 weeks before the deadline, and actually as we get farther into the year, we'll be better at having those portals available even earlier. But the portal itself will become available at least 2 weeks prior. And so it will also be on that same web page. So our thinking is like, get you the application so you can start working on it in Word, share it with your colleagues, and then someone's going to need to come back and copy and paste everything into the actual portal. So that's important. We also will provide some like technical assistance about using the portal. We know that will be important. And so again, sign up for the listserv so that you are not missing the opportunities to understand, to know when this stuff is. We also are going to create a formal pre-review process similar to what we did with the college success grants last year, where if you want to submit your grant application early, we will give you feedback on it. And so we may expand this, but at this point, we are only committed to doing that for the college success grants. So that's Amplify, Accelerate, and Go Big, and the growing institutional capacity barrier removal grants. And so we will let you know if you want to utilize that, how to utilize it when we release those applications. The thing that's different this year is that we're working with Complete College America to help provide that. So you're really getting really excellent support about, what are the right, like how to strengthen your application, what's the evidence basis for different proposals, what are best practices people have tried in other places. Like, it can be really helpful. I believe that schools, I shouldn't speak for them, I suppose, but I believe that schools that took advantage of our pre-review process last year, really, we saw significant improvements in my mind in the applications that we then received. And so I really think it is worth it. What it does mean is that you probably have to be ready with your application, at least at sort of like a B- to B+ level, a month in advance, because in order to get them read and then get feedback to you. So if you think you want to take advantage of that, pick the deadline you're aiming for and then aim a month earlier. So we'll share exactly what that process is going to be like as we release applications. But I just want to encourage you to take advantage of it if it's possible for you. And then I sort of keep saying this, we're going to be doing office hours almost every week. We'll be doing additional webinars, both technical assistance and like as we are releasing the additional applications, a lot of them, I think there's a real benefit to calling into an office hours and saying, here's what we're thinking. Like, I'm not sure if it's an Amplify or an Accelerate or like, would you fund this? We're not going to say yes or no. We're not going to be able to give you a like really clear guidance, but we're not going to be able to approve or not approve your proposal. But we will be able to talk to you about like, which pot should you be applying for? What are the eligible expenses? We can answer some overall questions about like what it is that you're thinking. And whether we think that is helpful. We could also help direct you to additional support from Complete College America, for instance, or other folks to make sure that you're designing a robust proposal. So get on the listserv and like join us. Don't be shy, please. There's no advantage to like surprising us with your great application, instead of talking to us first. So as I have mentioned, the Quick Start and Barrier Removal Direct to Student grants are available. The first deadline is March 22nd. So I know that some people are thinking, that's crazy. We can't do that in a month. And maybe you can't, and that's fine. There are additional deadlines, and there's not an advantage to doing the first one. But we have a sense from some conversations that other institutions are like, let's get this money moving. So they are ready. And we wanted to be responsive to that and be available. So this is all of the information about like how to stay in touch on all of these. So, this is available on the website, the michigan.gov 60 by 30 grants. You can sort of re-find all of this stuff. Additional weekly office hours are going to be announced. And, like I said, we really encourage you to sort of stay in touch with us. Questions. So again, I know I can see there's some chat stuff, but my hope would really be that like throw your questions at us. Like we may not get them, but if we start to hear that, we may not be able to answer them today, but if we start to hear them, we can then, use that to inform all of these other like webinars, office hours, additional guidance documents that we'll put on the website, et cetera. So it will really help us if you share your questions now. Tamara, are you able to see? I don't actually see anything in the chat. Are you able to see the Q&A?
Yes, so there's a few that I've plucked out that will address, I think more largely these appeal to most people. And there's probably some questions that we've already started parsing out that we'll address later on in additional follow-up and on the website. So one of the questions which you did touch on, but just wanted to make sure that it was reiterated, are community-based nonprofits eligible for funding?
Yes, they are. So what we will want to see there is a strong partnership with a college or colleges. I guess actually there's one exception, so I'm glad somebody asked this because it prompts me to mention it. In the Quick Start barrier removal grants, we are open to funding some organizations that are not colleges and are not in just like a one-to-one relationship with colleges, but it is limited. And so, and what we will, the sort of burden on them then is that we do need to make sure that those grants aren't like duplicative with grants that students might be receiving then through their college. So there's more information about that in the actual application. But so for all of the rest, what we want to see is that nonprofits are in a strong partnership with an institution. And that will include like a letter of support, participation in an interview potentially like of the institution. Oh, I had one other thought about that, but I lost it. Yeah, okay. I also think, have some people raised their hands?
Yeah, there are two people with their hands raised.
Okay, we could take, if you, are you able to unmute yourself, Lauren Geiger?
I think you have.
Oh, I have to click allowed to talk. Sorry.
Yes.
Okay, Lauren, if you still have a question, I saw you have your hand raised.
Yes, I had a question about community foundations. However, it was well answered with your explanation about partnering with a university.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you so much.
Michael Poole, I see you have your hand raised. Would you like to ask a question?
Sure. You've answered it already. Thank you so much.
Great. Well, I love this. Okay. Golda Slits, man, our names start the same, but they are different in letters 3, 4, and 5. So,
yeah, so don't even try. I won't try yours if you won't try mine.
Okay.
And I'm sure you married into it as well. But back to the question, are private colleges eligible for any of these grants? Or these?
Private colleges are not eligible.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And that's per the policy, per statute.
Right. Thank you.
Are there other questions in the
Looks
chat?
like
Oh yeah, go ahead.
I just saw John raise his hand and it looks like he unraised his hand.
Okay. I see one question about evaluation, and I'm glad to answer that. We do mention, wanting to, really wanting to learn with these grants about what works and, what doesn't work the way we expected. We don't think that the funding is large enough to really mandate that you hire an external evaluator. And so what we want to see is more that you have the internal processes in place in order to sort of be learning while you're running the grants. We also are working with some partners, including Complete College America, but others, and sort of some of this is really still coming together, to sort of create like reflection and learning opportunities for colleges that especially receive some of the larger grants, to sort of build the reporting process. Reporting is going to be required for all of the grants, obviously. That's but so that some of that evaluation becomes something we're doing kind of collaboratively. And so more information will be, forthcoming on that as we continue to develop that. So we're hoping to have some learning partners who can take a little bit of the load off of the colleges to sort of do that evaluation independently. What we will want to see in the applications is just like, you have a plan for assessing your data qualitatively and quantitatively internally to know if what you're doing is working. So I hope that answers that question. There will be a budget template. That was a question. Someone said, will that be available? Yes, it will.
Another question we've got are organizations limited to one request per category?
Yes. Well, under the college success, like broad category, you could potentially get 2 college success grants. You can't get 2 Go Big grants or 2 Accelerate grants, but you could receive an Amplify grant and an Accelerate grant. But for the most part, yes, it's sort of max 1 per grant pool. I see a question about, could the Quick Start grants be used to fund student barriers such as food pantry material and supplies, clothing, housing? No, it cannot. It's really for a process but what you're asking about there would be appropriate to include in the barrier removal direct to students grants. So that funding can be used to support food pantry, clothing, housing, all of those barriers. The Quick Start grant can help you figure out what's the best way to deploy funds like that to support our students with additional barriers, but not to actually sort of, reduce those barriers today.
Another question that we got is, and they just want to confirm that these grants are one-time and not eligible for renewal.
Yes. I will say I would love to make a case that our institutions and our students deserve that we need ongoing support like this. And I hope that we are make such an impact with these grants that we start to build the case for increasing state funding for student success efforts. At this point, this is a one-time appropriation and one-time funding. As you know, it can be spent over multiple years, but it's just the one time for now. I see a question about the barrier-free or reducing barriers direct to students. Would laptop purchases for students fall under that? Yes, they could be. Reducing sort of technology barriers could be a part of that.
I think with 2 minutes left, we have probably like 30 plus questions, so maybe we go into closing
Not answered.
remarks.
Yep. Okay, so we definitely won't get to those. I see one here that I can answer about the formula for the direct to students grant. The question is, we've already calculated that sort of max award. Is there enough in the total grant funding that every college on the list could apply and be awarded? And the answer is yes. It's designed so that every college could receive that funding. Again, we still need quality applications that show that the college has a plan for getting that funding to students. So it's not a guarantee, but there is enough funding available for all schools to receive that. So, okay, I think we will wrap. And as Kamara just said, there's a lot of open questions. I am going to go back really quick just to, we have a thank you closing slide here. But I just want to really, again, encourage you to sign up for the listserv. Visit this website, the 60 by 30 grants website is where we will keep posting information as additional guidance comes out, but we will keep emailing folks about it. We'll let you know about additional opportunities to come and ask us all these type of questions. And again, to say, here's a question that is really just for my organization or my college. I don't, those office hours would be appropriate ways to do that. I just want to close. I want to close by thanking you all for being here. It's really exciting to, we've been working on developing this program for a while, and it feels wonderful to have it in the world. We're excited about sort of the enthusiasm and questions we're already getting, and we hope we're designing a process and we're open to feedback that is allowing this funding to sort of flow towards the most strategic and impactful opportunities that your colleges have for serving students. And we say that with some humility about, we know that each institution is different, and we've tried to design a process that can meet every institution where they are, and are excited to move this funding into the ecosystem. So again, thank you all for being here. Please stay in touch, ask us whatever questions, and we will sort of keep trying to be as transparent and communicative as possible as we go through this process together. Thank you all so much. Thanks. Have a good rest of your day.